Daniel Carter grabbed the woman's wrist and twisted. Not hard enough to break, hard enough to stop her. The syringe in Rachel Solis's hand froze 6 inches from Victoria Whitmore's neck. For 1 full second, nobody in that ballroom breathed. Then Daniel looked Victoria Whitmore dead in the eyes, a stranger, a maintenance worker, a nobody in a faded uniform, and said 4 words that made no sense and saved her life. "You're in danger. Say I'm your husband." Victoria stared at him. The syringe was still there. Rachel's hand was shaking. Security was 20 feet away and moving in the wrong direction. And the man holding it all together was a broke single father who smelled like machine oil and hadn't slept more than 5 hours in 3 days. Nobody in that room knew his name. In 10 minutes, nobody would forget it. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and stay with me. Because what happens next will change the way you see every person you've ever walked past without looking. The night it happened, Daniel Carter was on his knees, not praying, not begging. He was on the floor of a service corridor on the 4th floor of the Grand Sterling Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, his left hand jammed inside the panel of a malfunctioning security door, his right hand holding a flashlight between his teeth, sweat dripping down the back of his neck. It was 11 minutes past 9. The ballroom 1 floor below him was packed with the most influential people in American technology, venture capitalists, federal contractors, CEOs who could move markets with a single phone call. And tonight, the guest of honor was Victoria Whitmore, 29 years old, founder and chief executive of Whitmore Technologies, a company that had gone from a rented garage in Brooklyn to a $2.7 billion valuation in less than 6 years. Daniel knew her name the same way everyone knew her name. From headlines. From the kind of profile pieces that run in magazines stacked in waiting rooms, the ones nobody reads all the way through. He knew she was young, successful, and that people wrote about her like she was some kind of miracle. He did not know her face. He had never looked that closely. He had his own problems. "Carter." The radio on his belt crackled. "You still on that door?" He pulled the flashlight from his teeth. "Yeah, Mike. Motors seized. Give me another 10. Front desk is getting complaints about the ballroom temperature. You finished with that thermostat on 3. Done an hour ago." "Good." After the door check on the freight elevator, reported a grinding sound. "Copy." He clicked the radio off and went back to the panel. Daniel Carter was 32 years old. He had been working at the Grand Sterling Hotel for 14 months. Before that, he had worked nights at a packaging warehouse in the Bronx, and days doing odd job repairs for a property management company in Queens. Before that, before all of it, he had been someone else entirely. Someone with a different uniform and a different purpose. But he did not think about that anymore. Or he tried not to. What he thought about most of the time was his daughter. Her name was Lily. She was 7 years old. She had her mother's eyes green with a little ring of brown near the center, and she asked questions constantly. Why is the sky different colors at sunset? Why do people shake hands when they meet? Why do some people have a lot and some people have nothing? Daniel never had perfect answers for her questions, but he always tried. Tonight Lily was home with Mrs. Huang from the 3rd floor, who charged him $30 for the evening and always made Lily hot cocoa without being asked. He had texted Lily at 7:30. She had sent back a drawing a crayon stick figure with the label Dada written underneath in crooked letters, which she had photographed and sent from Mrs. Huang's phone. He had looked at that picture 3 times already. He finished with the security door at 9:22, tested the motor twice, logged it on the maintenance tablet. Then he gathered his tools and walked toward the freight elevator. The Grand Sterling was one of those old New York hotels, the kind that had been grand once, genuinely grand before the city changed around it, and the grand hotels moved uptown. The corridors on the service floors still had the bones of something elegant underneath the fluorescent lights and the scuffed linoleum. Old brass fixtures, plaster molding, the skeleton of a different era. Daniel had spent enough hours in those service corridors to know the building the way he knew his own apartment. Which doors stuck, which lights flickered before they blew, which patches of flooring had soft spots under the carpet. I was passing the 4th floor landing, The one that looked down through a window onto the lobby mezzanine when he stopped. Not because he heard something, because something he was seeing didn't fit. He stood still. The mezzanine level below was a buffer zone between the lobby and the ballroom foyer, a transitional space with low lighting and a few scattered armchairs. Most of the event guests had moved through it already. It was mostly empty now except for hotel staff maintaining their positions and the outer ring of the private security team that Victoria Whitmore's company had brought in. Daniel had walked past that security team twice earlier in the evening. 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. He had registered their positions the way he registered most things, not consciously, not as a decision, but as a habit that had been pressed into him years ago and never fully left. There were 5 people in that mezzanine now. He stood at the window and looked down, and he counted again. 5. The new one was a woman, standing near the far armchair, holding a small tablet dressed in the hotel's staff uniform. Black slacks, white-collared shirt, the silver Grand Sterling name badge. Daniel frowned. He knew most of the hotel staff working this event. He had worked alongside them during setup. He had walked the entire floor with the event coordinator that afternoon. This woman had not been there this afternoon. That by itself meant nothing. Staff got added last minute. Shifts changed. But something was bothering him, and he couldn't immediately name it. He watched her. She was looking at the tablet, making small movements with her thumb scrolling or pretending to scroll. Her body was turned slightly away from the main corridor. Then Victoria Whitmore walked through the ballroom foyer entrance below, flanked by 2 of her personal security guards, and the woman with the tablet lifted her eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough. And in that second, Daniel saw something he recognized. Not curiosity. Not admiration. Assessment. The woman was calculating something. Measuring distance. Noting positions. Daniel had seen that expression on people before. He had worn it himself in a different life in situations where the stakes were different and the outcomes were permanent. His hand tightened around the handle of his toolbox. He watched for another 40 seconds. Victoria spoke to someone near the entrance, laughed at something, touched the arm of a colleague. She was relaxed. She was not looking at the woman near the armchair. Her security guards were scanning the room, but their attention was on the perimeter, on the obvious, on the doors and the crowd, and the people moving in and out. They were not looking at the woman who was already inside. The woman with the tablet shifted her position. Just slightly. A half step toward the corridor that led to the private elevator bank on the east side of the building. Daniel's chest tightened. He had 14 months in this building. He knew where that corridor led. It led to the executive elevator, the one reserved for VIP guests staying in the hotel's private suites. The one that bypassed the lobby entirely. A quiet exit. No cameras in that corridor. He knew that because he had reported the camera outage twice, and it had not been repaired yet. He had put it in writing. Twice. He moved. Not running. Running attracted attention. He moved the way he used to move in situations that required speed without panic, steady, purposeful, direct. Down the service stairs to the mezzanine level. Through the maintenance access door that opened without a key. Into the lobby. He came around the corner of the mezzanine, just as Victoria turned toward the private elevator corridor. Her guards were behind her. The suspicious woman was ahead of her, already in position, moving to intercept from the side. Her tablet lowered her hand, reaching into the pocket of her uniform. Daniel moved faster. He came around the chairs and got in front of her. Victoria looked up and nearly walked into him. Her guards reacted instantly. Both men stepped forward, hands out. "Sir." Daniel did not look at the guards. He looked at Victoria. "You're in danger." His voice was low, flat. The kind of voice that does not waste itself on volume because it does not have to. "Do not go to that elevator." Victoria stopped. Her face was difficult to read, equal parts irritation and something else. Some small controlled alarm. "Who are you?" "My name doesn't matter. Look to your left. The woman near the corridor entrance. She's been tracking your movements for the last 10 minutes. She's not hotel staff." One of the guards stepped in front of Daniel. "Sir, I need you to step back. Your camera in that corridor has been down for 3 weeks. Daniel said, still looking at Victoria, not the guard. "I've reported it twice. Nobody fixed it. If she gets you in that corridor before your guards catch up, you have no coverage." Victoria looked at the guard. Something passed between them, a flicker of uncertainty in his expression that she caught, and he didn't mean to show. The second guard was already moving not toward Daniel, but toward the corridor entrance, his hand at his earpiece. Daniel said quietly, "Don't make it obvious. If she's watching, she'll run." Victoria stared at him. I was sweating. He had a toolbox in his left hand, and a radio on his belt, and grease on the back of his right knuckle, and he was standing in front of one of the most powerful women in America, telling her not to walk down a corridor. She said, "How do I know you're not the threat?" "You don't," he said simply. "But I just gave you specific information about a documented security failure in this building that your team should have caught. Ask yourself why they didn't." Her jaw tightened. The suspicious woman was moving again. Not toward the elevator now, she had sensed something shifting. She was angling toward the lobby exit. Daniel said, "She's going to run in about 8 seconds. If your team wants her, they need to move now." Victoria looked at her guard. "Marcus." Marcus was already on his radio. The woman made it 4 steps before 2 security personnel came from opposite ends of the lobby and cut her off. There was no scene, no struggle. Not really, just the quiet finality of being surrounded by people who are larger and faster and have already decided how this ends. She stopped. Her hands went out. The tablet hit the floor. Everything was over in less than 30 seconds. The ballroom guests never knew. The security team brought Daniel into a small office near the hotel management suite. The room had a table, 4 chairs, and a window that looked out at a brick wall. They took his toolbox. They were not unkind, but they were not warm either. He sat down and waited. He had been in rooms like this before. A man named Hargrove came in first. He was the head of security for Victoria's company X Law Enforcement, the kind of man whose stillness is its own kind of aggression. He sat down across from Daniel and put a legal pad on the table and looked at him for a long moment without saying anything. Daniel looked back at him. "Name?" Hargrove said. "Daniel Carter." "You work here?" "Maintenance. 14 months. "Where were you before this hotel?" "Warehouse in the Bronx. Property management in Queens." Hargrove made a note. "Before that..." Daniel paused 1 beat. "Emergency response. But that was a while ago." Hargrove looked up. "What kind of emergency response?" "The kind where you notice things." He let that sit. "I don't talk about that job anymore." Hargrove studied him. "Why not?" "Because I left it for reasons that are mine." Another pause. Hargrove put his pen down. "The woman we detained," he said. "Her name is Rachel Solis. She had a fake credential package badge access card, the uniform, and she had a detailed schedule of Ms. Whitmore's movements for this entire evening. We're still working through what exactly she intended, but what she had on that tablet..." He stopped. "It wasn't nothing." Daniel said nothing. "How did you spot her?" Hargrove asked. "My people didn't." Daniel thought about how to answer that. He thought about Lily at home with Mrs. Huang probably asleep by now. He thought about a night 5 years ago when he had not spotted something, had not trusted the thing in his chest that said something is wrong, and had paid a price that could not be calculated in any currency he knew. "She was counting," he said finally. Hargrove frowned. "Counting. The distance, the angles. When someone's looking at a room to enjoy it, their eyes move one way. When they're measuring it, they move differently." He leaned forward slightly. "She wasn't looking at the event. She was looking at the gaps in your coverage. I watch people move. It's just something I do." Hargrove was quiet for a moment. "Your camera report," he said. "You filed that twice. 3rd floor East Corridor. The outage has been there since May." Hargrove wrote something on his pad and underlined it, and the motion was sharp enough that Daniel understood it would be dealt with by morning. The door opened, and Victoria Whitmore walked in. Hargrove stood. Daniel started to stand. Victoria held up one hand, and they both stayed where they were. She sat down in the chair at the end of the table. She looked different up close. The television version of her was polished and precise. Every answer perfectly formed, every gesture deliberate. The person sitting 3 feet from Daniel looked like someone who had just had a very long evening and was choosing not to show it. "He can go," she said to Hargrove. Hargrove looked at her. "We haven't finished." "I know, but he can go while we talk." Hargrove looked at Daniel, then back at Victoria, then picked up his legal pad and left the room. The door closed. Victoria and Daniel sat across from each other in a room with a table and a window looking at a brick wall. She said, "Emergency response." "Yes." "What happened?" He was quiet. "You don't have to tell me," she said. Not gently, Victoria Whitmore did not appear to do things gently, but without pressure, like she was simply stating a fact. "I left because I lost someone," he said. "Because I was in a situation I should have read better, and I didn't, and someone died." He looked at his hands. "My wife. Not on the job. It's—" He stopped, started again. "It's complicated. But after that I couldn't do it anymore. I had a daughter to raise. I needed a quiet life." Victoria was looking at him steadily. "But you couldn't stop noticing things," she said. He looked up at her. "No," he said. "I couldn't stop that part." She nodded slowly, like he had confirmed something she had already decided. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You could have reported it through the proper channels, called it in to hotel management, let my security team handle it. Instead, you walked out there yourself. Why?" Daniel thought about how long to take before answering. He decided not to take long, because the proper channels had already failed. The camera report, the gap in coverage. Someone should have caught Rachel Solis before she got inside that building, and nobody did. By the time I called it in, you'd already be in that corridor. He paused. "I've seen what happens when you wait for the proper channels when someone is 40 feet away from a target." Victoria was quiet. "She wasn't going to hurt me," she said. "Not quite a question. I don't know what she was going to do," Daniel said. "And that's exactly the point." They kept him for another hour. Not detention questions, most of them routine. Background checks that came back clean. Verification of his employment records, his previous positions, the emergency response work that he had listed under a previous employer, and which they confirmed without him having to provide more details than he chose to offer. At 11:45, Hargrove returned to the room and slid a card across the table. "Ms. Whitmore would like to speak with you again before you leave." Daniel looked at the card. It had a room number on it, one of the hotel's executive suites on the 8th floor. He picked it up. He thought about texting Mrs. Huang to check on Lily, but it was almost midnight, and Lily would be asleep, and Mrs. Huang would have texted him if there was anything wrong. He went upstairs. The suite was large. Not extravagant functional luxury, the kind of space that is expensive because it is efficient and private, not because it is decorated for show. Victoria was standing near the window when he came in. She had changed out of the formal outfit from the event. She was wearing a plain dark blazer, now a coffee cup in one hand. She gestured at the chair across from her. He sat. "Reward," she said without preamble. "I want to offer you one." "No." She paused. "I haven't told you the amount." "It doesn't matter." She looked at him with an expression that said she was not accustomed to that response. "Why not?" Daniel thought about how to say it. He had not prepared for this conversation. He had not honestly prepared for any of this evening. He had come to work at 9 o'clock with one goal, which was to fix a security door and a freight elevator, and get home by 2 and sleep for 5 hours before Lily woke up at 7. Because what happened tonight was just what you do, he said. When you see something wrong, you address it. I'm not going to take money for doing the thing any person with eyes should have done. Most people with eyes didn't. That's not an argument for a reward. That's an argument that something is wrong with how we pay attention to each other. She looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. She had the kind of face that did not give away what was happening behind it, but her eyes were moving, thinking. "What do you need?" she asked. "Excuse me. Not a reward, not charity. What do you need in your life right now? What is the actual problem you're trying to solve?" He was quiet for a moment. "A better situation for my daughter," he said finally. "She's 7, she's smart. She's asking questions I can barely keep up with. I want her to grow up somewhere better than where we are right now. I want her to have options I didn't have." He paused. "But I want to earn it. I'm not looking for a handout." Victoria put her coffee cup down. "I know what you want," she said. "I can see it. The way you look at people, the way you process a room, the specific knowledge you've retained from a career you walked away from, but never really left. That's not maintenance work. That's a skill set. And my company has a significant gap in it." Daniel looked at her. "You're a woman who runs a $2.7 billion company," he said. "And you're offering a job to a maintenance worker you met 40 minutes ago." "I'm offering a conversation," she said, "about a role that doesn't currently exist, but should. Human intelligence. The kind that doesn't come from a report or a camera feed. The kind that comes from a person who's learned to look at the world like a puzzle that's always slightly different from the last time they checked." She picked up her coffee again. "Tonight proved my team has a blind spot. You're sitting in it." He didn't answer immediately. "I was thinking about Lily. About the crayon drawing. About the green and brown eyes. About a version of his life where the thing that broke him became somehow the thing that made him useful again." "I have conditions," he said. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not surprise, more like recognition. Like she had been expecting this, and the presence of conditions confirmed something she had been testing for. "Tell me," she said. "My daughter comes first, always. If something conflicts with her school, her health, her schedule, she takes priority." "Agreed." "I'm not performing anything. No title that doesn't reflect what I'm actually doing. No seat in a meeting I'm not genuinely part of." "Agreed. And if I tell you something is wrong, you listen. You don't filter it through 3 layers of management before it gets back to the person who can act on it. Because that's what almost got you killed tonight, the distance between the problem and the person who needed to know." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "That one," she said, "is going to require some work. On my end." "I know." "But agreed," she said. She extended her hand across the table. He looked at it. He thought about what he was doing. He thought about the fact that 6 hours ago he had been eating a peanut butter sandwich in a supply closet and texting his daughter a goodnight message. He shook her hand. "One more thing," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Fix the camera in the east corridor." For the first time all evening, Victoria Whitmore laughed. Not a polished laugh. Not a performed one. A real one surprised out of her by someone who hadn't tried to impress her, and the absence of that effort had caught her completely off guard. Daniel left the hotel at midnight. The city was doing what New York does at that hour, running on its own particular frequency, lights and movement and sound woven together into something that never quite stops. He walked to the subway entrance on 49th Street, went down the stairs, and stood on the platform with his toolbox. A train came in 3 minutes. He sat down in the car and looked out at the tunnel wall passing in the dark, and he thought about the evening. He thought about Rachel Solis and what she had been reaching for in that pocket. He thought about Hargrove's legal pad. He thought about Victoria Whitmore's laugh, genuine unguarded, landing in the room, like something that didn't quite belong to the rest of the evening. He thought about his wife. Her name had been Claire. She had laughed like that sometimes, surprised into it, like the best version of a feeling. He had spent 5 years not thinking about that, or trying not to. The train stopped at his station. He climbed the stairs and walked the 4 blocks to his building and let himself in quietly. Mrs. Huang's light was off. He paid her in an envelope he slid under her door. He had learned she preferred that to knocking late and went into the apartment. Lily was asleep on the pull-out sofa. She had fallen asleep reading her library book still open on the cushion beside her. He picked up the book and marked her page and folded her blanket more completely around her shoulders. She stirred. "Dada." "Yeah, Bug. Go back to sleep." "Good day." He thought about it. "Yeah," he said. "Interesting day." She made a small sound and turned into the pillow. He sat down in the chair across the room and looked at her sleeping. For years he had been trying to decide who he was now. After Claire. After the job. After the version of himself that he had believed in and then lost. He had been trying to figure out if the person he used to be was still in there somewhere waiting. Tonight he had his answer. He just wasn't sure yet what to do with it. But for the first time in a long time, he thought maybe, just maybe, the question mattered less than he had believed. Because the man who had walked into that ballroom tonight, invisible in his faded uniform carrying his toolbox, thinking about his daughter, that man had seen something nobody else saw. That man had acted. That man was him. And that he thought as his daughter slept across the room and the city moved outside the window. That was enough to start with. The syringe hit the marble floor and shattered. Rachel Solis screamed not from pain, but from the sudden absolute certainty that everything had gone wrong. Daniel's grip on her wrist had torqued her arm at an angle that left her no options, and when she tried to pull back, he stepped into her movement instead of away from it, and the result was that she lost her balance entirely and went sideways into the nearest chair. Security arrived 4 seconds later. 4 seconds that felt like 4 years. Victoria Whitmore had not moved. She was standing exactly where she had been standing when Daniel grabbed Rachel's wrist, and her face was doing something complicated. Processing, calculating. Running through what she had just watched happened with the speed of someone who had trained herself never to be caught flat-footed. But underneath the processing, underneath the calculation, there was something raw. Something she hadn't expected to feel tonight and wasn't sure what to do with. She had almost died, or something close to it. Close enough. Marcus, her head guard, arrived with 2 of his team, and they had Rachel on the floor and secured in under 20 seconds. One of the other guards pushed Daniel back, not roughly but firmly, the kind of push that says we'll deal with you next. Daniel let himself be pushed. He put his hands up and took 3 steps back and stood still. He was breathing hard. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the specific adrenaline of someone who had done something like this before and knew exactly what the aftermath felt like. The way the body charges itself up for a crisis and then has no idea what to do with all that energy when the crisis ends. He looked at his hands. He made them stop shaking by pressing them flat against his thighs. Marcus was on his radio. 2 words clipped and urgent. Then he looked up at Victoria. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. "Ma'am, I need you to—" "I'm not hurt, Marcus." Her voice was steady, the kind of steady that takes work. "Deal with her." Marcus looked at Daniel. And him. Victoria looked at Daniel for the first time since the syringe had stopped moving. Really looked at him. The maintenance uniform. The toolbox on the floor where he'd dropped it. The grease on his knuckles. The steadiness in his eyes that shouldn't have been there given what had just happened. "He stays," she said. Marcus opened his mouth. "He stays," she said again, and something in her tone closed the conversation. They moved the situation into a contained corridor hotel security. Marcus, 2 of Victoria's team, and Rachel Solis, who had gone quiet in the way that people go quiet when they understand that speaking will only make things worse. Daniel picked up his toolbox. A younger security guard pointed at it, and Daniel set it down again and looked at the guard until the guard looked away. A hotel manager arrived, pale and sweating, apologizing before he had fully entered the room. Victoria stopped him with 1 sentence. "Get your security director in here right now." The manager left faster than he arrived. Daniel stood against the wall. He watched Victoria work the room, saw her take command of a situation that could have unraveled badly and instead pull it tight, assign people to tasks, make decisions in a sequence that was efficient and without panic. She was good at this. He could see why people paid attention when she walked into a space. It wasn't just the success or the money or the magazine profiles. It was the quality of her attention. She paid attention the way Daniel paid attention. Like the details actually mattered. Like the small things were the whole thing. He noticed that and filed it away without deciding what to do with it. After about 12 minutes, the immediate situation was stable. Rachel was being held in a secured room. Law enforcement was on the way. The ballroom event was continuing without interruption. The guests hadn't seen anything. The Grand Sterling was going to get through tonight without a scandal, which Daniel suspected was the hotel manager's primary concern, and which he did not particularly care about. Victoria crossed the corridor and stood in front of him. She said, "That was a syringe." "Yes." "She was going to inject me with something." "That was my read." In the middle of a hotel full of people. "Bold move," Daniel said. "Or desperate one. Hard to know which without knowing more about her." Victoria studied him. "You've seen that before. Someone going after a target in a crowded space." "I've seen variations of it." "Where?" He met her eyes. "A different life." She accepted that without pushing, which surprised him. Most people pushed. Victoria Whitmore just nodded once and moved on like she had catalogued the information and would return to it later on her own terms. "You twisted her arm," she said. "Yes." "Before I even understood what was happening. There wasn't time for a longer process." "I know." She paused. "I'm not criticizing. I'm trying to understand the timeline. Because from where I was standing, you moved before I saw the syringe, which means you saw it first." "I saw her hand go to her pocket," he said, "and the angle of her body, and the way she was looking at your neck." He stopped. "People look at what they're aiming for. It's a reflex, hard to override even when you're trained." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel Carter. How long have you worked in this hotel, Daniel?" 14 months. She nodded slowly. And in those 14 months, how many times have you spotted something that other people missed?" He thought about it honestly. "A few." "Did you report them?" "The camera outage, twice." He let that land. Her jaw tightened. "I know. Hargrove told me." She glanced toward the room where her security director was. "He's going to have a difficult conversation with his team tonight." "It's not just the camera," Daniel said. "The gap in coverage on this floor has been a gap for 3 weeks. Your team was watching the perimeter. They weren't watching what was already inside." He paused. Rachel Solis had a hotel uniform, a badge, a tablet, and a specific location in this building where there's no camera. She knew all of that, which means she had inside information about this building's security posture. Victoria looked at him sharply. "You think someone told her?" "I think she didn't find the camera gap by accident." The air in the corridor changed. Victoria turned and called across the space. "Marcus?" He came immediately. "Get Hargrove, full team review, tonight. I want to know how Solis got her credential package and who in this building's staff she might have had contact with." Marcus was already moving. Victoria turned back to Daniel. Her expression had shifted. The processing was still there, but something else had joined it. Something that looked almost like respect, which on her face was more intense than warmth. "You just made this night significantly more complicated," she said. "You're welcome," Daniel said. She looked at him. And then something he would not have predicted, she almost smiled. Not quite. Just the beginning of one caught and held back. Like she'd decided smiling wasn't appropriate yet, but hadn't entirely dismissed it. "It come upstairs," she said. "I have questions." He picked up his toolbox. "Leave it," she said. He thought about it, set it down, followed her to the elevator. The elevator doors closed, and they rode up in silence. 8 floors. Daniel watched the numbers change. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, not looking at him. Looking at the doors, thinking something through. When the doors opened, she said, without turning, "Thank you." He said, "You're welcome," and meant it simply without addition. She walked out. He followed. Upstairs in the suite after Hargrove had come and gone and taken his legal pad and his questions with him after Marcus had checked in twice through the door and been waved off twice after the coffee had been poured and the city outside had settled into its late-night frequency. Victoria sat across from Daniel and said something he had not expected. "Tell me about your daughter." He looked up from his coffee. "Hargrove's report," she said. "Single father, 1 child 7 years old. He included it in the summary because he includes everything. I don't need the summary version. Tell me about her." Daniel considered the question. I was not accustomed to being asked about Lily by people who had no connection to his life. It felt like being asked to show something he normally kept in his chest pocket close and private. But something about the way Victoria asked, not as small talk, not as a softening gesture, before a harder question made him answer. "Her name is Lily," he said. "She's 7. She's going to be the smartest person in any room she walks into for the rest of her life, and right now she's asking questions I can barely keep up with." He paused. "She wants to understand how everything works. Machines, people, why things are the way they are. Last week she asked me why some people have security guards, and some people don't have enough to eat, and whether that seemed fair to me." Victoria was very still. "What did you say?" she asked. "I said no, it doesn't seem fair. And then she asked me what we were going to do about it, and I told her we were going to work hard, and pay attention, and try to make our corner of the world a little better than we found it. She accepted that. She said she thought we could probably do more than a corner." He looked at his coffee. "She's 7, but she's not wrong." A silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that happens when something real has been said, and both people in the room know it and aren't in a hurry to cover it with noise. Then Victoria said, "My company has a problem." "I know," Daniel said. "I saw it tonight. Not just tonight. Tonight was the most dramatic version of it, but it's structural." She leaned forward. "I have a team of highly trained, highly paid professionals who are very good at seeing exactly what they've been told to look for. They run the protocols, they check the boxes, they file the reports, and they are completely blind to the thing that doesn't fit the protocol." She looked at him directly. "You are the opposite of that. You see the thing that doesn't fit. How long have you been doing that?" "Since I was about 22, he said. "It was trained into me. But honestly, I think it was always there. I just learned to trust it." "In emergency response?" "Yes." "You said you left because you lost someone." He was quiet. "You don't have to." "My wife," he said. "Her name was Claire. She was sick. She'd been sick for a while and I knew something was wrong. She had symptoms, she was downplaying, and I kept reading them as less serious than they were, because I didn't want to be the kind of person who sees danger everywhere. I told myself I was being alarmist." He stopped. "She wasn't in an emergency response situation. She was just sick. And I didn't push hard enough with the doctors, and I didn't trust what I was seeing, and she died of something that might have been caught earlier if I had." He looked up. "So I quit. Because I decided I was the wrong kind of person for a job that required you to trust your instincts when my instincts had failed the one person I—" He stopped again, looked at the window. "Lily was 2. I just stopped doing everything except raising her and surviving." Victoria said nothing for a long moment. "But tonight, you trusted them," she said finally. "Your instincts. Tonight someone else was in danger. It's easier with someone else." "Why?" "Because you can be wrong about yourself. You can't afford to be wrong about someone else." The room was very quiet. Victoria put her coffee cup down, with the kind of deliberateness that meant she was deciding something. "I want to offer you a position. Not tonight. I don't make permanent decisions at midnight after a near crisis, but I want to have a real conversation about it. Because what you just described, the ability to see something wrong before it fits a protocol, combined with the specific experience you have, my security structure has a critical gap in exactly that space." She paused. "And because, to be honest, in the last 2 hours, you have said more useful things about how my team operates than anyone on my payroll has said in the last 2 months." Daniel looked at her. "I'm a maintenance worker," he said. "You're a maintenance worker who just stopped someone from injecting an unknown substance into the CEO of a publicly traded technology company in a room full of federal contractors and investors," she said. "Call it what you want." He thought about Lily. About what a different life would look like. About the crayon drawing on Mrs. Huang's phone, the stick figure labeled data in crooked letters. About the question Lily had asked last week. "Do you like your job, Dada?" And the answer he had given, which was not quite yes and not quite no, and had satisfied neither of them. "I have conditions," he said. Victoria's expression shifted. "Of course you do." And the way she said it, not condescending, almost appreciative, told him something about her. "My daughter comes first. If there's a conflict, she wins." "Fine." I won't perform a title. Whatever I do, it has to be real work with real weight. I wouldn't want it any other way. A figurehead doesn't help me. And if I tell you something is wrong, the information comes to you directly. No filtering, no layers. Because the thing that almost killed you tonight was distance between the problem and the decision maker. Victoria was quiet for 3 full seconds. That one is harder, she said. I know. My organization has 4,700 employees. I'm not talking about all 4,700. I'm talking about the specific channel where a critical security observation goes from the person who makes it to the person who can act on it. That channel needs to be short. He paused. Tonight it was 0. Because I walked up to you directly. I need a version of that to exist as a formal structure, not just as an emergency workaround. Victoria looked at him for a long time. Then she said, Agreed. She extended her hand. He looked at it. I thought about all the reasons this was a strange thing to agree to. All the reasons a man in his position should be skeptical of a woman in hers, offering something that seemed too fast and too significant. He thought about the ways this could go wrong. He had been in situations before where someone with power made a gesture toward someone without it, and the gesture turned out to be something smaller than it appeared. He thought about all of that. Then he thought about Lily saying, I think we could probably do more than a corner. He shook Victoria Whitmore's hand. One more thing, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Fix the camera in the east corridor. This time she laughed, and it was the same laugh as before, unguarded, real, surprised out of her. The kind of laugh that doesn't care about the room it lands in. Daniel thought that was probably a good sign. What neither of them knew yet, what wouldn't become clear until later, until the investigation deepened and the connections started to surface, was that Rachel Solis was not a lone actor. The credential package, the specific knowledge of the camera gap, the detailed schedule of Victoria's movements. None of that came from nowhere. Someone had given it to her. Someone who worked inside Whitmore Technologies. Someone who had been in Victoria's inner circle long enough to know things that weren't written down anywhere. Hargrove would find the first thread of it at 2:17 in the morning while going through Rachel Solis's communication records on a department-issued laptop that Rachel should not have been able to access. The name he found there would change everything. But that was later. Right now, Daniel Carter left the Grand Sterling Hotel at 12:31 a.m. and walked to the subway and rode home and let himself into his apartment and found his daughter asleep with her library book and put her blanket around her more completely and sat in the chair across from her in the dark. He thought about Claire. He did that less often now than he used to, but tonight he did it deliberately, like pressing on something to see if it still hurt the same way. It did. But underneath the hurt, there was something else now, something that had not been there before tonight. He was trying to name it. He sat with it for a while. Then Lily stirred and turned in her sleep and made a small sound, and Daniel watched her, and he thought that the thing underneath the hurt might be something close to purpose. Not the purpose of a job or a title or a paycheck. The purpose of being the specific person with the specific history who was in the specific place at the specific moment when it mattered. He had spent 5 years believing his history had broken him. Tonight had suggested a different possibility. I wasn't sure yet what to do with that. But for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, he wanted to find out. Outside New York kept moving. It always did. The city had no memory and no patience and no particular interest in the interior lives of the people living inside it. But Daniel Carter sat in his chair in the dark and felt quietly like something had changed. He just didn't know yet how much. Hargrove found the name at 2:17 in the morning. He had been going through Rachel Solis's communication records for almost 2 hours, and for most of that time, he had found exactly what he expected to find. Burner accounts, encrypted messaging, threads, the digital footprint of someone who had been careful but not careful enough. What he had not expected to find was the name at the end of the thread. The name that appeared in 11 separate messages over the course of 6 weeks, always giving information, always specific, always accurate. The name was James Whitmore, Victoria's brother. Hargrove sat in the hotel management office for a long time after that, looking at the screen. He was not a man who rattled easily. He had spent 20 years in federal law enforcement and had seen the specific kind of damage that comes when trust is weaponized by someone close to you. He had investigated it, documented it, testified about it in court. He knew what it looked like. He picked up his phone and looked at it. Then he put it down. He looked at the screen again. Then he picked the phone back up and called Marcus. "Wake her up," he said. Marcus said, "It's 2:30 in the morning." "I know what time it is. Wake her up." Victoria was awake in 40 seconds. That was the thing about her that Hargrove had noticed in the 3 years he had worked for her. She did not ease into consciousness. She arrived at it fully like a switch being thrown, and the first words out of her were never disoriented or soft. "What did you find?" she said. Hargrove told her. The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of someone reorganizing everything they thought they knew about the last 6 weeks into a new shape, checking each piece against the new information, finding where it fit and where it didn't. "Say the name again," she said. Hargrove said it again. Another silence, shorter this time. "Send me everything you have," she said. "Don't contact him. Don't let anyone on the team contact him. I want to see it first." Victoria. "I said I want to see it first, Hargrove." He sent it. She read it in 12 minutes. Hargrove knew because she called him back at 2:49 and said, "It's him." Just that. 2 words, flat and certain, and carrying the specific weight of someone who has just confirmed the worst possible version of the thing they were hoping wouldn't be true. "We need to involve law enforcement," Hargrove said. "We already have law enforcement coming for Rachel Solis. This is bigger than Solis. I know how big it is." Her voice had not changed. That steadiness she carried, Hargrove had always found it impressive. Tonight it frightened him a little, because underneath it he could hear something that steadiness was working very hard to contain. "Give me until morning. I need to think." "Victoria, your brother. Give me until morning." Hargrove gave her until morning. What none of them knew yet was that James Whitmore had been awake for the same 2 hours. Not in New York. He was in a hotel room in Boston, where he had gone for a conference that he had not in fact attended. He was sitting on the edge of the bed in his room, watching his phone, waiting for a message from Rachel Solis that was not coming. Had not come for 3 hours. Would not come. At 3:10 a.m., James Whitmore understood that something had gone wrong. He made 2 phone calls. Neither was answered. He sent 3 messages to an encrypted account. No response. He sat back down on the edge of the bed and looked at the floor and thought about what came next. He had been thinking about what came next for 6 weeks, building contingencies, planning exits. I was a careful man. He had always been a careful man. He had spent his entire adult life being the careful, measured, precise one. The one who thought 3 steps ahead, who covered angles, who never moved without knowing what the landing looked like. The problem was that he had not anticipated Daniel Carter. He had not anticipated a maintenance worker in a faded uniform who noticed things that trained security professionals missed. He had not anticipated that the gap in coverage he had specifically identified for Rachel to exploit would be the same gap that drew someone else's attention. James Whitmore sat in his Boston hotel room and thought about Daniel Carter, whose name he did not know yet, and felt something he did not often feel. Surprised. And then almost immediately afraid. Daniel did not know any of this. Daniel was asleep in his apartment in Queens, which was the best decision he had made all night, because what was coming in the next 72 hours was going to require every resource he had. Lily woke him at 6:53. She did not do it gently. She climbed onto his chair, which was not comfortable to sleep in, but which he had not managed to leave, and she poked him in the shoulder twice, and then in the cheek once, and said, "Dada, you didn't sleep in your bed." He opened his eyes. She was looking at him with the green and brown eyes, and the expression she got when she had decided something was wrong and wanted an explanation. "I was tired when I got home," he said. "You're always tired when you get home. Fair point. Are you okay?" He looked at his daughter's 7-year-old library bookmark still in her hand, from where she'd picked it up off the floor. One sock on, and one sock somewhere else, and thought about what he would say if he told her the truth about last night. He decided he would tell her a version of the truth that was real without being frightening. "I had an interesting night," he said. "I helped someone." Her expression shifted immediately from concern to curious. "Who?" "Someone who needed it." "How?" "I noticed something that other people didn't notice." Lily considered this. Then she said with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone who has already organized the world into sensible categories. "That's what you do. You notice things." "Yeah," he said. "I guess it is." She climbed off the chair. "I'm going to make cereal. Do you want cereal?" "I want coffee." "You always want coffee. Coffee isn't breakfast, Dada." "Coffee is the foundation of breakfast." She gave him the look she had inherited from someone not him, not Claire, maybe some ancestor he had never met, who had also possessed a 7-year-old's complete certainty that adults were wrong about almost everything, and went to the kitchen. He sat for a moment in the chair alone and thought about James Whitmore's name on a screen in a hotel office. He didn't know that yet, but something from last night was still sitting unresolved in his chest, the way things sometimes sat when he had seen enough to know a shape was there, but not enough to name it clearly. The credential package, the camera gap, the schedule. Rachel Solis had been too prepared, too specifically prepared. The kind of preparation that doesn't come from research. It comes from access. He had thought that last and said it to Victoria, and she had passed it to Hargrove, and that was where he had left it. He had a feeling it wasn't going to stay left. His phone rang at 8:45 while he was walking Lily to school. He looked at the number. Unknown. He let it ring. It rang again immediately. He stopped on the sidewalk and Lily looked up at him and he held up one finger. He answered. "Daniel Carter." The voice was Hargrove's, clipped direct, carrying something underneath it that had not been there last night. "Yes," Daniel said. "We need you at the office. Today. Victoria is requesting your presence. I'm walking my daughter to school." After that? What happened? A pause. "The investigation expanded overnight. Victoria wants you in the room." Daniel looked at Lily, who was looking up at him with patient, intelligent eyes, already understanding from his expression that the morning had taken a turn. "I'll be there by 10, he said. I took Lily to school. At the gate she hugged him around the middle the way she did, hard, unself-conscious, like she was checking that he was solid, and then pulled back and looked up at him. "You're going to help someone else today," she said. He crouched down to her level. "Maybe." "Good," she said, simply, like it was obvious. Then she walked into school without looking back, which was her way. Once she had decided something was right, she moved forward and didn't second-guess. He stood up and watched her go. Then he got on the subway and went to Whitmore Technologies. The offices were in a glass building in Midtown 42nd floor, the kind of space that had been designed to communicate confidence and precision. Daniel had never been inside it. He gave his name at the front desk, and a woman came down to meet him and walked him to a conference room that was all windows on two sides and a long table, and people who looked like they hadn't slept. Victoria was at the head of the table. She looked exactly like someone who had been awake since 2:30 a.m. and had decided that showing it was not an option. Hargrove was to her right. Marcus was standing near the door. Three others Daniel didn't recognize were spread around the table with laptops and folders, and the particular energy of professionals who have been handed a problem that is bigger than the box they were given to put it in. Nobody introduced themselves. Victoria said, "Sit down, Daniel." He sat. She looked at him steadily. "What I'm going to tell you in this room does not leave this room. Not because I'm asking you to protect me. Because what we're dealing with right now is active. And if the wrong information reaches the wrong person before we're ready, the person responsible walks away clean." She paused. "Do you understand?" "Yes," he said. Rachel Solis was not acting alone, Victoria said. She was directed, given access information credential materials, a detailed map of our event security, including the specific camera gap you identified. She was told exactly where to be and when. Daniel watched her face while she said the next part. "The person who gave her that information is my brother." The room was very quiet. Daniel did not react outwardly. This was a skill he had, keeping the outside still, while the inside processed. Inside, he was running back through everything he had seen and said last night, finding where James Whitmore fit and where he didn't, checking the shape of it. "How much does he know?" Daniel asked. Hargrove looked up. "About our investigation. About last night. What happened, how it went wrong, what we know." Hargrove said, "He knows something failed. He's been trying to contact Solis since midnight. No response because she's in custody and her devices are seized. He made 2 additional calls to numbers we've now identified as associated with the operation. Both went unanswered." "So he knows it failed, but he doesn't know how much we know." "Correct." Daniel leaned forward. "Then you have a window, a short one. He's going to assume the failure was operational. Solis was caught, the plan collapsed, and he needs to distance himself. He's not going to assume you have his communications. He'll start cleaning, deleting, moving money if money is involved, creating distance between himself and Solis on every level he can reach." He looked at Victoria. "How long has your brother been inside the company?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "He's been on the board for 4 years, minority shareholder." "Does he have access to your personal schedule?" "Through the executive assistant system." "Yes. Board members have limited access to CEO scheduling for coordination purposes." "Did you know he had that access?" She paused. "I approved it, 2 years ago, standard governance protocol." "And your home address, your personal security rotation schedule, your preferred routes. Does he have those?" A muscle in her jaw moved. "He's my brother Daniel." Which means yes. The word landed in the room, and nobody picked it up for a moment. Then Victoria said, "Yes." Daniel turned to Hargrove. What was Solis going to inject her with? Hargrove glanced at Victoria. Victoria said, "Tell him." "Lab results aren't complete," Hargrove said. "But preliminary analysis indicates a compound designed to cause cardiac arrest. Traceable with the right testing, but easily missed in a standard autopsy if the initial read is natural causes." He paused. "She would have been found in an elevator. Alone. Apparent heart attack." The room absorbed that. Daniel looked at Victoria. She looked back at him. I understood something in that moment that he hadn't fully understood last night. This was not corporate sabotage. This was not a rival company trying to damage Whitmore Technologies through scandal or leaked information. This was someone trying to kill her. Her own brother. For reasons that presumably had to do with the company, with money, with whatever James Whitmore stood to gain if Victoria was gone. I thought about the way she had looked last night standing in that corridor after the syringe hit the floor, processing, calculating, running through it with the speed of someone who had never learned to do things slowly. He thought about what it must feel like to run that calculation and arrive at a conclusion that included your brother. "Are you okay?" he asked. Everyone at the table looked at him. The question was so unguarded, so outside the register of the conversation they'd been having, that it disrupted the room's entire frequency. Victoria looked at him for a long second. "No," she said, simply, honestly, the same way he had answered her questions last night without performance, without the version of the answer that protected the speaker. "But I will be, after we deal with it." He nodded. "Then let's deal with it." What happened in the next 6 hours moved fast. It moved fast because Daniel pushed it to move fast, and because once Victoria understood his reasoning, she moved with him rather than against him, which meant things that would normally require approvals and meetings and scheduling happened in real time around a table. The window they had was closing. James Whitmore was in Boston, presumably making decisions. Every hour he had to plan was an hour that evidence could disappear, accounts could be cleared, associations could be severed. Hargrove knew this. Marcus knew this. The people around the table knew this. But knowing it and closing the window were 2 different things, and what had been missing before Daniel walked in was someone who could read the specific sequence of moves that would close it without tipping the target. Daniel mapped it out verbally, which was how he thought best out loud. Testing each step against the reactions in the room, adjusting where the reactions showed him something he hadn't accounted for. You can't confront him directly, he said. Not yet. The moment he knows the scope of what you have, he has nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing left to lose does things that a person protecting themselves won't do. So we wait, Marcus asked. We don't wait, we set conditions. Daniel looked at Victoria. He needs to believe that last night failed for reasons that don't implicate him. If he believes Solis was caught through a routine security check, no specific intelligence, no communication records, no name attached, he stays in calculation mode, controlled, manageable. You want to control the information he receives, Hargrove said. I want to give him a version of last night that keeps him calm and in position long enough for law enforcement to build what they need to move on him. He paused. You have his communications. Does he know you have them? No, Hargrove said. We accessed them through a federal warrant that was sealed this morning. Then he's going to underestimate what you have. Let him. Victoria said, You're describing a trap. I'm describing patience. There's a difference. He looked at her. Traps are built to catch someone doing something they weren't already planning to do. James is already planning. We're just not interfering with his plan while law enforcement gets into position. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, How long? Hargrove answered. 48 hours, minimum. The federal team needs to coordinate with the Boston field office and establish surveillance before we make any contact. 48 hours. Victoria looked at the table. Then she looked up and around the room at the people sitting in it. Her people she had hired and trusted and built a company around. Then she looked at Daniel. In 48 hours, she said, I am scheduled to attend a board meeting that my brother will also be at. The room's energy shifted hard. Daniel said, Cancel it. If I cancel it without explanation, he'll know something's wrong. Reschedule it. Legitimate reason. Give him something else to think about. He'll still have 48 hours too. We'll have 48 hours too, Daniel said. And we know what he knows. He doesn't know what we know. That asymmetry is the whole game right now. Victoria looked at Hargrove. Hargrove said, He's right. She nodded once. Decision made. No hesitation between the nod and whatever came after it. That quality again, the capacity to decide and move. He was learning to watch for it the way she absorbed information and converted it to action with almost no gap in between. Reschedule the board meeting, she said to someone across the table. Use the quarterly compliance review preparation as the reason. It's plausible. James knows we have that coming up. She looked at Hargrove. I want daily communication with the federal team. Not summaries, direct communication. I want to know what they know when they know it. That's non-standard, Hargrove said. So is being targeted for murder by your own brother, Victoria said. I'll manage the non-standard. The meeting broke up at 2:15 p.m. People left in groups of two, purposeful, moving into whatever task had been assigned to them. The room cleared fast. Daniel stayed. Victoria stayed. They were alone in the conference room for the first time since the hotel suite, and the quality of the silence between them was different from last night. Last night. It had been the silence of two strangers who had just been through something together and were still learning the shape of each other. This was something else. Two people who had spent 6 hours thinking alongside each other in a high-pressure room and had discovered that their thinking was compatible in a way that didn't happen often. You should go home, Daniel said. She looked at him. Excuse me? Not because you can't handle this. Because the next 48 hours are going to require you to behave normally in situations where behaving normally is going to be the hardest thing you've done. You need to sleep. You need to eat something that isn't coffee. He paused. And you need to not be in this building where he has access to information about your schedule longer than necessary. She studied him. You think he has someone else inside, she said. I think it's possible. I think until you know the full scope of what he built, you treat every system he had access to as compromised. He held her gaze. Including this building's schedule system. Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she said, You know everyone in my life, every advisor, every board member, every person who has ever told me they were looking out for my best interests, has always framed their concern around the company, around the stock price, around the liability. She paused. You're the first person in a long time who has framed it around me. Daniel said, "The company doesn't matter if you're not in it." She looked at him. He said it simply, not as a compliment, as a fact, which was somehow more effective than the compliment would have been. "Go home," he said. "Let Marcus drive you. Different route than usual. Don't use the executive elevator in this building today." She stood up, gathered her things with the efficiency of someone who did not make secondary decisions about objects' jacket phone portfolio. She paused at the door. "Daniel," she said. He looked up. "The thing you said last night, about being the wrong kind of person for a job that required trusting your instincts." She held his gaze. "You were wrong. About being the wrong kind of person. Last night proved that. Today proved it again." She paused. "I just wanted you to know I see it." He didn't answer immediately. He wasn't sure what to do with that. Not the professional acknowledgement, which was simple, but the specificity of it. The fact that she had gone back to something he'd said in a quiet moment in a hotel suite, and carried it forward, and named it in the daylight. "Thank you," he said. She left. He sat alone in the empty conference room for a moment. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Huang's number. Lily's voice, because Lily sometimes dictated messages to Mrs. Huang when he was working. "Dada, did you help the person today? Also, I lost my other sock." He looked at the message. He typed back, working on it. "Check under the couch." 3 seconds later, it was there. "You always know things." He put his phone in his pocket and stood up. 48 hours. James Whitmore in Boston. Cleaning, planning, moving pieces that he believed were still on the board. Federal surveillance being established. A window closing slowly with controlled precision around a man who had spent his entire life being the careful one. Daniel walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. He thought about patience. About the difference between a trap and patience. About how the most dangerous thing a careful person could face wasn't someone smarter or stronger or better resourced. It was someone who noticed things and was willing to wait. The elevator doors opened. He walked out into the afternoon and thought that the next 48 hours were going to be very long. He was right. He just didn't know yet exactly how they were going to break. The 48 hours started at 3 p.m. on Thursday, and Daniel counted every one of them. Not obsessively. Not in the way that anxiety counts time checking and rechecking, feeling each minute as a small failure. He counted them the way he used to count them in a different life, with the specific practiced awareness of someone who understands that time in a critical situation is not a backdrop. It is a resource. It depletes. And how you spend it determines everything that comes after. Thursday afternoon. He went home, slept 4 hours. Made dinner for Lily, helped her with a worksheet about fractions that she did not need help with but wanted company for, and was in bed by 9:30. He told himself this was discipline. I was not entirely sure it wasn't also exhaustion. Friday morning, 6:15 a.m. Hargrove called. Daniel was already awake. He had been awake for 20 minutes, sitting in the kitchen with coffee, doing the thing he did in the early morning when something was unresolved, turning it over slowly, looking at each surface, checking for the thing he had missed. James Whitmore flew back to New York last night, Hargrove said. 11:40 p.m. flight from Boston. Federal surveillance picked him up at LaGuardia, followed him to his apartment on the Upper East Side. He was on the phone for most of the car ride. "We have the numbers, but not the content. The warrant for call intercept is still being processed." "He's moving faster than we expected," Daniel said. "Yes." "What changed?" "We don't know. Something accelerated his timeline." Daniel thought about that. He turned it over. "Did anyone on your team make contact with him? Any contact at all, even routine?" "No, I was explicit." "What about Victoria? Could she have said something to him, even something that seemed completely unrelated?" A pause. "I'll ask her." "Ask her now," Daniel said. "Before we go further." Hargrove put him on hold for 90 seconds. When he came back, his voice had a different texture. "She called him Wednesday night, before I found the communications, before she knew. He was her brother." She called to tell him she was okay after the event incident. She described it as a routine security situation, nothing specific. She said he sounded normal. He would have, Daniel said. But he also would have read everything she didn't say. If she called him specifically to say she was okay, he'd understand that something happened that was significant enough to warrant the call. And if Solis had already failed to make contact, he'd connect those two data points. Another pause. He knows the operation failed and that Victoria is aware enough to call him directly. He's calculating what she knows, and whether she suspects him specifically, Daniel said, which means he's not cleaning, he's not running, he's deciding. Deciding what? Daniel said, whether to finish it. The silence on the line was the specific silence of someone absorbing a possibility they had considered but hoped was wrong. He has another option, Hargrove said. It was not quite a statement. It was closer to a question. He has resources she doesn't know about, access she doesn't know about, and he now believes the window is closing. Daniel stood up from the kitchen table and moved to the window. A man who has already decided to kill his sister does not stop because the first attempt failed. He recalibrates. I need to tell Victoria. You need to move the federal timeline up, Daniel said. And you need to move Victoria out of any predictable location, today. The federal team said 48 hours minimum. Hargrove. Daniel's voice was steady, not loud. The kind of steady that carries weight by itself. The 48 hours was based on him staying in Boston and moving carefully. He flew home 11 hours early, and he was on the phone for the entire car ride. The timeline your federal team built is already wrong. Call them. A beat of silence. I'll call them, Hargrove said. They hung up. Daniel stood in the kitchen for a moment. Through the wall, he could hear Lily moving in her room, the soft, specific sounds of a 7-year-old getting ready for school with absolute confidence in the sequence of the morning, because the sequence of the morning was one of the things that had not changed and would not change, regardless of what else was happening. He went to her door and knocked twice, which was their signal. Come in, she said. She was sitting on her bed putting on her shoes. One sock. Both shoes miraculously. She looked up at him. You have that face, she said. What face? The thinking face. The one where you're thinking about something you can't tell me. He sat down on the edge of the bed. I have some work today that might go late. She finished tying her shoe, started on the second one. The person you're helping. Yes. Is it dangerous? He looked at his daughter. 7 years old, and asking him directly whether what he was doing was dangerous with the clear-eyed practicality of a child who had grown up without a mother and had learned early that honest questions were more useful than comfortable ones. There's someone who might try to hurt the person I'm helping, he said. My job is to make sure that doesn't happen. Lily tied her shoe, looked up. Do you know how to do that? I think so. But you're not sure. I'm not sure about all of it. I'm sure about enough. She considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything, and then she nodded once, which was her way of saying the explanation was satisfactory, and she was moving forward. Okay, she said. Mrs. Huang can pick me up if you're late. I'll call her. And Dada. She stood up. Don't do the thing where you put other people first so much that you forget to be careful. He looked at her. You always do that, she said. You think about the other person so much, but you have to come home. He stood up and hugged her, and she hugged back both arms, the way she always did, fully, without reservation, like she had decided that half measures were not worth doing. I'll come home, he said. She pulled back and looked at him with those eyes. Promise. Promise. She picked up her backpack and walked out of the room, because once Lily Carter had extracted a promise, she treated it as settled and moved on. Daniel stood in her room for a moment after she left and thought about how a 7-year-old had just said the most important thing anyone was going to say to him today. He called Mrs. Huang. He texted Hargrove. He was out the door by 7:20. At 8:50 a.m. Daniel walked into a different location than the Whitmore Technologies office, a midtown conference room in a building that had no connection to the company, booked under a name that was not Victoria's, which had been Hargrove's idea, and which Daniel had endorsed because the possibility of a second compromised person inside the organization was still live, and every variable that could be controlled should be. Victoria was already there. She looked like she had slept 4 hours and decided that was enough. Her eyes were sharp. Her posture was straight. She was holding a coffee cup with both hands and looking at something on her phone, and she looked up when Daniel came in with the specific attention of someone who has been waiting for a particular person. "Hargrove told me about James," she said. Daniel sat down. "How are you?" "I need you to stop asking me that," she said. Not unkindly, directly. "I understand why you do it, and I'm grateful for it, but every time you ask me that, I have to decide how honest to be, and that takes energy I need for other things right now." "Fair enough," he said. "What did you decide overnight?" "That he's not going to stop," she said. "That whoever James is now is not the person I grew up with, and I need to stop making decisions as if he is." She set down the coffee. "And that whatever I'm feeling about that, I feel it later. Not now." Daniel nodded. "The federal team is moving the timeline," he said. "Hargrove got them on the phone at 7 a.m. They're establishing active surveillance now, and they're petitioning for the call intercept warrant on an expedited basis. The issue is that James hasn't done anything this morning that they can directly act on. He's being careful." "Of course he is," Victoria said. "He's always been the careful one." "But careful people make mistakes when they accelerate," Daniel said. "He flew home early. That was a mistake because it told us his timeline moved. He made calls he shouldn't have made in a vehicle, even encrypted ones, because he was anxious. Anxious people compress their caution. They start cutting steps." Victoria was watching him. "What step is he going to cut?" "I don't know yet, but something is going to move today." He paused. "I can feel it." She looked at him for a moment. "You trust that feelings?" "I trust what feelings are made of," he said. "They're not magic. They're pattern recognition moving faster than conscious thought. I've been running this situation since Wednesday night, and something in the overall pattern says today is the day it breaks. That might be wrong, but I've been wrong less than I've been right, so I pay attention to it." A slow moment passed between them. "James had a business partner," Victoria said. 11 years ago, before he joined the board. A man named Porter. They did 2 deals together. Both of them collapsed. Both of them cost investors significantly. There was an investigation. Nothing was ever proven, but James was changed after that. More closed. More calculating." She stopped. "I always thought it was just maturity. Experience making him more guarded." She looked at her hands. "I didn't look closely enough." "You trusted him," Daniel said. "Yes." "That's not a failure of intelligence. It's a function of relationship. The people closest to us have the best angle to deceive us, and we extend trust proportional to proximity. That's normal. That's human." She looked up. "It nearly killed me." "Yes," he said. "It did. And if you spend the next year punishing yourself for trusting your brother, you'll be giving him something he doesn't deserve." He held her gaze. The failure was his, not yours. The room was very quiet. Then Hargrove came through the door fast enough that both of them turned. "Call intercept came through," he said. "Expedited grant. Federal team pulled the first batch of intercepts from this morning." He had a tablet in his hand. "James made 4 calls between 7 and 8 a.m., 2 to his financial advisor, 1 to a private attorney in Delaware, 1 to a number that belongs to a man named Kyle Mercer." Daniel said, "Who is Kyle Mercer?" Hargrove looked at the tablet. "Private security contractor. Runs a 3-man operation out of New Jersey. His company had a contract with Whitmore Technologies 18 months ago for event security consulting. The contract was not renewed." He paused. "The recommendation against renewal came from Marcus." Victoria said, "Why?" "Inadequate credential verification protocols." Hargrove looked up. "Which is significant, because Mercer's operation specializes in exactly that, building credential packages for operatives to gain access to private events." The air in the room changed. Daniel said, "Mercer built Rachel Solis's package." "Almost certainly," Hargrove said. "The federal team is pulling his records now." "What was the call about?" Victoria asked. The intercept, what did James say? Hargrove looked at the tablet again. He read it without editorial. James said, quote, "The situation needs to be resolved this week. I don't care how. Find someone who can move quickly and doesn't need a long setup. Keep it simple this time." Nobody spoke. Keep it simple this time. Victoria set her coffee cup down with a careful, controlled movement that was the opposite of how she was feeling, and Daniel recognized that quality in her, the way she converted internal pressure into physical precision, the way her hands became more deliberate the more difficult the information was. "He's contracting someone new," Daniel said. "Mercer is the intermediary. The new contractor is probably someone Mercer has used before. Faster setup, less infrastructure, which means less traceable, but also less precise." He looked at Hargrove. "Where is Victoria's schedule showing her for the rest of this week?" Hargrove said, "She has a public appearance tomorrow. A Technology Education Foundation event. She's presenting a grant. It was announced 3 weeks ago, and it's on the company website." "Cancel it," Daniel said. "If we cancel." "I know. It tells James the plan isn't working." Daniel thought fast. "Don't cancel it. Change the security posture around it without changing the public announcement. Put a visible version of Victoria at the event, someone in that role publicly, while Victoria is somewhere else. If Mercer's contractor is moving fast, they're moving toward a visible public target. Give them the target and have law enforcement waiting." Victoria looked at him. "You want to use a decoy. I want to use the fact that James built his plan around your predictability, your schedule, your routes, your public appearances. He's been watching you long enough to believe he knows how you move." Daniel's voice was even. "Let him believe that for 24 more hours. And if the contractor moves on the decoy before law enforcement is in position. That's the detail we build right now with Hargrove and the federal team until every element is covered." He looked at her. "This can work, but it requires you to trust the plan completely. No deviations, no impulse decisions, no contact with James for any reason." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "You're asking me to disappear for 24 hours while someone wearing my role in public draws fire from a contractor my brother hired to kill me?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Essentially. And you think this is the right move?" "I think it's the move that ends this," he said. "Completely, not partially. If we pull James in for questioning now based on what we have, his attorney walks him to bail in 72 hours, and the contractor Mercer connected him to goes to ground, and we've got an unresolved threat and a brother who knows we know." He paused. "If we let this play out the right way, we get James on conspiracy, we get Mercer on facilitation, we get the contractor in the act, and it's finished." Victoria was quiet. Hargrove said, "He's right, Victoria." She looked at the table. She was running through it. He could see her doing it, the same quality of processing he had seen in the hotel corridor, in the suite, in the conference room yesterday. The complete internal simulation of the options and their outcomes. "Who's the decoy?" she asked. Hargrove said, "We have an agent who can be prepared. Federal team can provide someone with the right physical profile. And the foundation event, they'll need to be informed. At the director level only, minimal exposure." She nodded. "Processing." Then she looked at Daniel. "Where do I go?" "Somewhere James has no data on," Daniel said. "Somewhere that doesn't appear in any system he's had access to." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said something he had not expected. "Your apartment." He looked at her. "Think about it," she said, and her voice had shifted. She was in problem-solving mode. Now the emotion compartmentalized and the logic running clean. "It's a Queens apartment registered to a maintenance worker. It doesn't appear in any database James would have thought to search. No connection to the company, no connection to my schedule, no connection to any location pattern I've established in the last 4 years. It's the one address in this city he has absolutely no reason to look at." Daniel considered it. She was not wrong. The logic was clean. "I have a daughter," he said. "I know. She comes home from school at 3:15. "I know." He looked at her. "If this goes wrong, I know Daniel." Her voice was quiet now, stripped of the executive register, just a person talking to another person. "I would not ask if I thought it put her at risk. If the risk level changes at any point, I leave. Immediately. No argument. She held his gaze. I'm asking because it's the right tactical call, and because I trust you. Both of those things. He sat with it for 10 seconds. Okay, he said. Hargrove made the calls. The federal team coordinator, a woman named Agent Reyes, who had been running the operation from a field office in Lower Manhattan, came on a secure line and walked through the framework with them for 40 minutes. She pushed back on 3 elements. Daniel pushed back on 2 of her pushbacks and conceded 1. Reyes conceded both of his. The plan was built by 11 a.m. At 12:30 p.m., Victoria Whitmore arrived at Daniel Carter's apartment in Queens in an unmarked car, wearing a dark jacket and carrying nothing but her phone and a small bag. Mrs. Huang's door was closed. The hallway was quiet. Daniel unlocked the door and held it open. Victoria stepped inside and looked around the apartment. The worn furniture, the books stacked in improvised shelves along the wall, the small kitchen with the coffee maker and the dish drying rack, and the crayon drawing taped to the refrigerator. The bicycle half assembled near the window. The library book on the couch with the marked page. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "She drew you taller." Daniel looked at the refrigerator. The stick figure labeled Dada was objectively quite tall, roughly the height of the door. "She's generous," he said. Victoria sat down in the chair Daniel had slept in 2 nights ago, the chair he sat in at night when he needed to think, and she put her phone on the arm and she breathed. Just breathed. For the first time since Wednesday night, she was in a space that James Whitmore had no data on, no access to, no angle into. For the first time in 40 hours, the specific tension that she had been carrying in her shoulders without showing it. Daniel had seen it, had noticed it. The way he noticed everything, had not commented on it, because she hadn't asked him to release slightly. Just slightly. But enough to see. He made coffee. She accepted it. They sat. At 1:40 p.m., Hargrove called. Mercer contacted a man named Victor Slade. Former military, dishonorable discharge, 3 prior arrests. Clean conviction on 1 count of assault. He's been used before for quick contract work. We've had eyes on him since 11:30. He's in the city. Daniel looked at Victoria. She was looking at her phone. Where? Daniel said. Moving toward Midtown, which is consistent with the Foundation event location. Hargrove paused. Reyes has people in position at the venue. The decoy agent is in place and visible. Everything is set up. James. Still in his apartment, on the phone. We have intercepts running in real time. Daniel said, when Slade gets within 2 blocks of the venue, Reyes moves. That's the plan. And James? The moment Slade is in custody, Reyes has a team at James's building. He gets picked up at the same time so he can't be warned. Good. Daniel looked at Victoria again. We're close. She looked up from her phone and held his gaze. I thought about what close meant. Close meant that in the next few hours, the man who had planned her death was going to be arrested. The man who had sat at her board table, who had access to her personal schedule, who had called her on Wednesday night to hear her voice, and determined from it how much she knew that man was going to be in federal custody before dinner, and she was going to have to feel all of that. After. When the tactical part was finished and the operational clarity dissolved, and what was left was just the human weight of it. He thought about what it felt like to sit with that kind of weight. He knew something about it. At 2:50 p.m., Lily came home from school. She let herself in with her key. Daniel had given her a key at 6, which most people thought was young, but Lily had treated the responsibility of it with the gravity it deserved from the first day, and had never given him reason to second-guess it. She opened the door, came in, dropped her backpack, looked up, and saw Victoria Whitmore sitting in the chair with a coffee cup, and stopped. She looked at Daniel. He said, "This is the person I've been helping." Lily looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Lily. Lily said, "You have my dad's coffee cup." "He gave it to me," Victoria said. "I can give it back." Lily considered this. "That's okay. We have 2. She put her backpack on its hook because everything had a hook, a designated place, because Daniel had built their small apartment around the principle that order was a form of safety, and she came into the room and sat on the couch and looked at Victoria with the direct, unembarrassed attention of a 7-year-old who had not yet learned that sustained eye contact made adults uncomfortable. "Are you the one who's in danger?" Lily asked. Victoria glanced at Daniel. Daniel said, "Bug. What you said you were helping someone who was in danger. Is it her?" A pause. Victoria said, "Yes, it's me." Lily nodded. "My dad is good at that, helping people who are in danger." She said it with the simple pride of someone stating a fact they are confident in. "He notices things other people don't notice." Victoria looked at Daniel. I was looking at his daughter, and something was happening in his face that he did not try to control, some combination of love and grief and pride, and something that had no name, all of it visible for a moment before he put it back in the place where he kept it. "He does," Victoria said softly. At 3:47 p.m. Hargrove called. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Slade is in custody," Hargrove said, and his voice had the flat relief of someone delivering news they had been building toward for 2 days. "Reyes moved when he was within 50 yards of the venue entrance. He had a weapon. He's in federal custody, and he's talking." A pause. "And James was picked up at his apartment 11 minutes ago." Daniel was quiet. "It's done," Hargrove said. Daniel said, "Is she safe?" "Definitively safe." "Definitively," Hargrove said. "Mercer was picked up in New Jersey 20 minutes ago. All three. James, Mercer, Slade. The chain is complete." Daniel looked across the room at Victoria. She was looking at him. She had read his expression through the call without hearing a word of it, and she already knew. Her face was doing the thing it did when something enormous was being processed, very still on the outside, everything moving underneath. He said, "It's done." Victoria put down the coffee cup. She looked at the crayon drawing on the refrigerator. She looked at Lily, who was doing homework on the couch with the focused efficiency of someone who had decided the adults would handle whatever needed handling, and she had fractions to finish. She looked at Daniel, and for the second time since Wednesday night, Victoria Whitmore, CEO founder, the woman who changed the future of technology, the woman who had built everything from nothing and controlled every room she walked into, allowed herself to feel something completely. Her eyes filled. She didn't look away. She let it happen. Daniel said nothing. He did not rush to fill the space or soften it or redirect it. He had lived long enough with loss and with the aftermath of crisis to know that some moments need to be inhabited rather than resolved. Lily looked up from her homework. She looked at Victoria. She put down her pencil. She got up off the couch. She walked to the chair and stood in front of Victoria and said with the complete uncomplicated compassion of a child who had not yet learned to make it complicated. "It's okay. He came home. He always comes home." Victoria looked at her. Then Victoria laughed. Wet and surprised and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh that is indistinguishable from crying and doesn't try to be. Lily looked satisfied. She went back to the couch and picked up her pencil. Daniel stood in his kitchen in Queens and thought about Wednesday night. About a faded uniform and a toolbox, and a woman with a syringe, 6 inches from the neck of one of the most powerful people in the country. About a 7-year-old's crayon drawing and a promise that had to be kept. About Claire always. Claire, the absence that had shaped everything after it. He thought about what Lily had said. He always comes home. He looked at his daughter doing her homework and the woman in the chair who had just survived something that should not have been survivable, and he thought that maybe this specific moment in this specific apartment, with its worn furniture and its library books and its bicycle half-assembled by the window, was what purpose felt like when it finally stopped being an idea and became a life. Not a perfect life, not a glamorous one, but his. And for the first time in 5 years, that felt like exactly enough. James Whitmore was arraigned on Friday morning at 9:15 a.m. in a federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, and Victoria did not go. Hargrove had asked her twice if she wanted to be there. Marcus had offered to arrange it. Her attorney had said it was her right, her prerogative, that being present sent a message to the court and to the media about where she stood. She told all three of them the same thing. No. Daniel understood why without asking. Being in that room meant seeing James in a defendant's chair, and seeing James in a defendant's chair meant confronting the version of her brother that had existed in parallel to the version she had known, the one who had sat across from her at board meetings and family dinners and birthday calls for years while simultaneously building the architecture of her death. That confrontation was coming. It was unavoidable. But Victoria Whitmore chose when and how she confronted things, and she was not ready to do it in a federal courthouse with cameras outside and attorneys performing for the record. She was ready to do it on her own terms. Later. What she did instead on Friday morning was call Daniel. He was at Lily's school at 8:50 a.m., standing at the gate after drop-off when the phone rang. He answered without looking at the number because only 4 people called him before 9 a.m., and he recognized all 4. "How are you?" he asked. She said, "I told you to stop asking me that. You said it cost you energy you needed for other things. Today is different. Today the other things are handled." A pause. Something moved in that pause. He could hear her deciding something. "I'm not sure," she said. "I don't know how to do this part." "Which part?" "The after part. I've been in motion since Wednesday night. There's always been the next thing to think about, the next decision, the next move. And now there isn't. James is in custody. Mercer is in custody. Slade is in custody. My company is intact. My team is running the statement release for this morning." She stopped. "And I woke up at 4 a.m. and sat in my apartment and had absolutely nothing to do, and it was the most frightened I've been since I saw that syringe." Daniel walked away from the school gate and stood on the sidewalk. Around him, the city was doing its Friday morning routine. People moving with the particular purposefulness of people who need to be somewhere, the specific density of New York at rush hour, all of it indifferent and continuous. "That's normal," he said. "The fear during the crisis is functional. It has a direction. It's pointed at the problem, and it helps you solve the problem. The fear after the crisis has nowhere to go. It just sits there, and it feels worse than the thing it came from." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been carrying the after version for 5 years, he said. The crisis with Claire ended. She was gone. And the fear that I'd missed something, that I should have seen it sooner, that I'd failed her, that fear had nowhere to go. So it went inward." He paused. "You won't do what I did. You're too direct for that. But you need to give it somewhere to go. Something to do with what you've just been through." She was quiet for a moment. "Can we talk?" she said. "Today, in person." "Yes," he said. "Not the office. Not anywhere connected to any of this." "I know a place," he said. I took her to a diner in Astoria that had been on the same corner for 31 years and served coffee in ceramic mugs and had a counter where you could sit and watch the kitchen, and nobody cared how long you stayed. He had been going there since he moved to Queens. The owner, a man named Pete, who had emigrated from Greece in 1987 and had opinions about everything and shared them freely, knew Daniel by name and brought coffee without being asked, and looked at Victoria with the alert interest of someone who recognizes a face from somewhere but can't immediately place it and decides it doesn't matter. They sat at the counter. Victoria wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the kitchen and said nothing for a full 2 minutes, and Daniel let her have the 2 minutes because he understood that some people think best in silence, and she was one of them. Then she said, "Tell me about the moment you knew you had to leave emergency response. The specific moment. Not the broad version, the exact moment." He looked at his coffee. "It was 3 months after Claire died," he said. "I was on a call. Routine medical, someone had fallen in their apartment, possible head injury. We got there and the person was okay, minor concussion, no real danger. But when I walked into that apartment, I saw a photograph on the wall. A family photograph. And the woman in it looked like Claire. Not exactly she was a stranger, but something about the angle, the way she was laughing, the way her hair was. And I stopped. In the middle of a call. I just stopped and stood there for about 15 seconds. He paused. 15 seconds is a very long time when someone needs help, he said. My partner covered it. Nobody was hurt. But I knew in those 15 seconds that I was not reliable anymore. That my attention had a hole in it. And a job like that, a job where someone else's life depends on the quality of your attention, you don't do it with a hole in you. You find somewhere else to be until the hole closes. Victoria was watching him. Did it close? No, he said. But I learned to work with it instead of around it. And then Wednesday night happened, and I understood that working with it was actually the point. The hole is what made me pay attention the way I paid attention, because I knew what it cost to miss something. She was quiet. I have my own version of the hole, she said. James is mine. Not the same, not loss the way Claire was lost, but the realization that someone I loved and trusted was not the person I believed they were. That I built 4 years of decisions on top of a foundation that was lying to me. She stopped. That changes something. I don't know yet what it changes, but something. It changes what you look for, Daniel said. You start looking at the people around you differently, not with suspicion. Suspicion is exhausting and counterproductive. With attention. The same attention you'd give any complex system that you need to understand completely before you trust it. You look at people the way you look at broken machines. I look at people the way I look at everything, he said. Like the details matter. Like the small thing is usually the real thing. She looked at her coffee. I want to offer you the position again, she said. Formally. Not the version I described in the hotel suite at midnight, which was imprecise because I was running on 3 hours of sleep and adrenaline. The actual version. She looked at him directly. Director of Human Intelligence. It's a title I'm creating because it doesn't exist in my organization, and it should. Your specific scope is the gap. My security structure has the thing that protocols and cameras and trained teams missed because they're looking for what they've been told to look for. You look for what doesn't fit. You report directly to me. You have access to every level of the organization, which means you talk to the people in the mailroom with the same weight as the people in the boardroom, because that is specifically where the gap lives. Daniel looked at her. You thought about this at 4 a.m., he said. I thought about a lot of things at 4 a.m. This was the most useful one. What does it pay? She told him. He looked back at his coffee for a moment. Then he looked at her. That's significantly more than I make now. I know what you make now. I looked it up when Hargrove pulled your employment record Wednesday night. I've been thinking about this number since Thursday morning. She held his gaze. It's what the role is worth, not what I think will impress you. What the function is actually worth to the organization. He considered it. He thought about Lily. About the questions Lily asked that he couldn't fully answer yet. About the options he wanted her to have that he couldn't fully provide yet. About the version of the next 10 years that looked different from the version of the last 5. The conditions I named in the hotel suite, he said. They stand. I know they stand. Lily comes first, always. I know. And the direct channel, no filtering. I've already started building it, she said. I had my operations director working on the structural design Thursday afternoon. It's not a channel exactly, it's a protocol. Any observation flagged at any level of the organization that concerns safety, security, or organizational integrity goes directly to a dedicated inbox that I read personally every day. No intermediary, no manager approval, direct. She paused. It's going to create some friction with the management layer. Good, Daniel said. The friction means it's real. She almost smiled. The almost smile that she caught and held the one he had seen twice before, and which he was starting to understand, was the version of her that existed before she learned to be careful with her expressions in public. The unguarded version. The real register. There's something else, she said. He waited. I want to fund an education account for Lily, she said. Before you say no, which I can see you preparing to do, let me finish. It's not charity. It's not a reward for what you did Wednesday night. It is a recognition that the person who comes first in your life is a 7-year-old who asked you last week why some people have more than others, and whether that seemed fair, and who is going to need resources that match her actual capacity. She held his gaze. She's going to need more than a corner, Daniel. You told me that. I'm not letting you say no to the means to give it to her. The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and eggs, and 31 years of the same thing done reliably well. Pete was talking loudly to someone at the other end of the counter about something that may or may not have been baseball. Outside the window, the city moved. Daniel looked at his coffee mug for a long time. Then he said, "She has to know it's not charity, when she's old enough to understand it. I won't have her thinking she got something she didn't earn." "Then we tell her the truth," Victoria said. "That her father earned it, and that the person who benefited from what he earned chose to invest it where it would do the most good." She paused. "That's not charity. That's the economy of integrity. It actually works that way when people let it." He looked up at her. "Okay," he said. She nodded once. "Done." She picked up her coffee. Pete appeared from somewhere and refilled both mugs without asking, and gave Daniel a look that communicated without words that he had noticed Daniel's companion and found her familiar and was choosing to be professional about it, which for Pete was an act of significant restraint. Daniel said, "Pete, this is Victoria." Pete said, "I know who she is. I read the news." He looked at Victoria. "You're the one they arrested the brother for." Victoria said, "Yes." Pete nodded slowly. He looked at Daniel. He looked back at Victoria. Then he said with the complete unpretentious certainty of a man who had seen a lot of things in 31 years of running a diner and had developed reliable opinions about most of them, "Good man, this one. You're lucky he was there." Victoria looked at Daniel. "I know," she said. "I know that." Pete went back to his end of the counter. They stayed for another hour. They talked about things that were not the company, not James, not Wednesday night. Lily's questions about fairness and how Daniel answered them. Victoria's memory of building her first prototype in a rented garage at 23, with 2 engineers she'd convinced to defer their salaries for 6 months, the specific skill of trusting something you can't fully explain. They talked like 2 people who had been through something together and come out on the other side, and were now discovering that the other side contained a person they were genuinely interested in knowing. It was simple. It was the most uncomplicated hour Daniel had spent in longer than he could clearly remember. On the way out, Pete stopped Daniel at the door and said very quietly, "She looks at you like you're the most interesting thing in the room." Daniel said, "She's a very observant person." Pete gave him the look of a man who has been married for 26 years and knows the difference between observation and something else, and said nothing further. 3 weeks passed. They moved faster than 3 weeks had any right to move, and they moved with the specific quality of time that is full rather than merely occupied. Daniel started his new role on a Monday. He spent the first week doing what he had always done, walking through the building, watching how people moved, listening to what they said when they thought nobody important was listening. He talked to the woman who ran the mailroom, who had been with the company for 6 years and knew things about the organization's daily rhythms that no executive had ever thought to ask her about. He talked to the building security staff, the IT support team, the junior analysts who ate lunch at their desks because the lunch break culture on their floor didn't allow for leaving. He listened more than he talked. He wrote things down in a small notebook longhand because he thought better with a pen than a keyboard. And after 4 days, the notebook had 31 observations in it. None of them dramatic, all of them real. He brought them to Victoria on Friday afternoon. She read through the notebook in 12 minutes. She asked 4 questions. She made 3 immediate decisions that came directly from what he had written. Then she looked up at him and said, "This is exactly what I needed." He said, "Give me another week." She said, "Take whatever you need." What he discovered in the second week was the thing he had suspected, but not confirmed. There was a second compromised element in the organization. Not another person working with James. Something older and more passive than that. An informal communication pattern on one of the senior teams where information about Victoria's external schedule was shared casually among 6 people as a matter of professional convenience, with no malicious intent, in a group message thread that had no security oversight whatsoever. James had not cultivated it deliberately. He had simply known it existed because he had been at a dinner 2 years ago where someone on that team had mentioned it in passing, and he had filed it away. The pattern of a careful man. Filing things away. Waiting to use them. Daniel brought it to Victoria. She did not get angry. She got precise. She called a meeting with the 6 people involved, explained what she had found, and why it mattered, did not assign blame, because the intent had been innocent, and redesigned the information-sharing protocol with their input rather than over their heads. 2 of the 6 thanked her afterward. One of them, a senior analyst named Bridget, who had been with the company since year 2, pulled Daniel aside in the hallway and said, "You're the one who found it." "Yes," he said. Bridget said, "How?" "I asked the right people," he said. "The ones nobody thought to ask." Bridget looked at him for a moment. "We've needed someone like you for a long time," she said. "We just didn't know what to call it." "Director of Human Intelligence," he said. She considered this. Fancy title for someone who listens. "Most important skill in any organization," Daniel said. "Nobody ever figures that out until something goes wrong." Bridget laughed. Then she went back to her desk. Daniel went back to his notebook. The federal case against James Whitmore moved with the methodical momentum of federal cases, slowly, thoroughly, without drama. James's attorney filed the expected motions. The expected motions were denied. The evidence was substantial, the communication intercepts were clear, and Kyle Mercer, looking at a sentence that gave him strong motivation to cooperate, had provided testimony that filled every remaining gap. Victor Slade had done the same. James was not going anywhere. Victoria's attorney called her with updates every few days. She listened, asked precise questions, and then went back to running her company. She did not talk about James often. When she did, it was in the specific contained way of someone who has decided that a wound exists, will require time, and in the meantime cannot be allowed to govern everything else. Daniel respected that. He understood it. He had made the same decision 5 years ago about Claire. One evening in the 3rd week, he was still at the office at 7 p.m., which was later than he usually stayed. Lily was at a friend's birthday party and didn't need to be picked up until 8:30, which gave him a rare pocket of unstructured time that he had filled with a section of the building he hadn't walked through yet. He was in the stairwell between the 38th and 39th floors, making a note about a door that didn't close properly, when Victoria's voice came from the landing above him. "Are you seriously making notes about a door?" He looked up. She was standing on the landing with her jacket over one arm and a coffee cup in the other hand, which meant she had been in the building later than she planned to be, and had found him by chance rather than design. "The latch doesn't engage fully," he said. "If someone wanted unmonitored access to the 39th floor after hours, this is how they'd do it." She came down the stairs and looked at the door. He showed her. She looked at the way the latch fell short of the catch by approximately 3 millimeters. 3 millimeters, she said. 3 millimeters is the difference between a door that's secure and a door that isn't. She looked at the latch. Then she looked at him. "You know most people who walked past this door for the last how long has it been like this?" "At least a month," he said. "I checked the maintenance log. Most people who walked past this door for at least a month saw a door," she said. "You saw a problem." "I see what's there," he said. "Not what should be there." She was quiet for a moment. They were standing in a stairwell at 7 p.m., which was not a planned meeting, which was not a scheduled interaction, and the absence of structure made the moment feel different from their other conversations, more like 2 people and less like a professional arrangement. She said, "How's Lily?" "She's at a birthday party. She called me 40 minutes ago to tell me there was a bouncy castle." Victoria smiled. The real version. Was she excited? She described the structural mechanics of the bouncy castle in detail, and then told me she thought she could design a better one. He paused. So yes, she was excited. Victoria laughed. It landed in the stairwell and echoed slightly and sounded nothing like a CEO and everything like a person. "She's going to change things," Victoria said. "That kid. She's going to change actual things." "Oh," Daniel said. "I'm just trying to keep up with her until she's ready to do it." Another quiet moment. The building hummed around them, the specific sound of a large building after hours, when most of the human traffic had left and the systems underneath were more audible. Victoria said, "I talked to my therapist today. First time since all of this. She said the fact that I'm functioning well right now doesn't mean I've processed what happened. She said I'll hit a wall." "She's probably right," Daniel said. "She said I should prepare for it." "You can't really prepare for it," he said. "You can know it's coming. That's slightly different." He looked at the door latch. You just keep doing the next right thing, and you let the wall show up when it shows up. And when it does, you don't try to get through it. You just stand there until it decides to let you. She was looking at him. You've hit yours, she said. Haven't you, recently? He thought about how to answer. I think Wednesday night was part of it, he said. The wall had been there for 5 years, and I had been doing everything except standing still in front of it. And then I was in a ballroom reaching for a woman's wrist to stop a syringe, and something in that moment, the necessity of it, the clarity of it, something unlocked. He paused. I don't know if I'm through it, but I'm closer than I was. She said very quietly, because of Claire. Because of Claire, he said. And because of Lily. And because of a hotel maintenance job that put me in a specific corridor at a specific time on a night when someone who noticed things was the person that mattered. She was looking at him with an expression he had not seen before. Not the processing, not the calculation, not the executive precision. Something more open than that. Something that had its own kind of courage in it. The courage of letting someone see past the machinery to what was underneath. Daniel, she said. He looked at her. I'm glad you were there. He held her gaze. So am I, he said. And what he meant was, larger than the ballroom, larger than the syringe, larger than the 48 hours that followed. He meant all of it, the whole shape of the thing. That his history had not destroyed him. That his particular damage had turned out to be a particular gift. That a man who had spent 5 years believing he was defined by what he had failed to do had found out in a single irreversible moment of clarity that he was defined by what he was willing to do instead. What happened after that happened? The way things happen when two people have been through something together and come out the other side and discovered that the other side is somewhere they want to stay. Not quickly, not dramatically. Carefully and honestly, the way Daniel did everything, and with the specific thoroughness Victoria brought to every important thing. They made no announcements. They had dinners that started as working conversations and became something else without either of them making a decision about it. Lily, who noticed things with the accuracy of someone trained by a person who noticed things, observed the change in her father over the course of several weeks, and said one evening at dinner, "You seem different." Daniel looked at her. Different how? She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to everything. Like you stopped being careful about being happy, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said. Maybe. Lily considered this, deemed it satisfactory, and went back to her food. The conversation moved on. The evening moved on. The city outside the window moved on, the way it always did, indifferent and continuous. But the thing Lily had said stayed with Daniel for a long time after she was asleep, and the apartment was quiet. He sat in his chair, the chair where he'd slept the night it all began. The chair where Victoria had sat in the worst 24 hours of her life. The chair that had seen more of the real interior of his life than almost any other object he owned, and he thought about being careful, about being happy. He had been. For 5 years. He had treated happiness like a liability, like something that could be taken, like the price of losing it was higher than the value of having it. And so he had kept himself just below it, just functional, just enough, just sufficient for Lily and for the requirements of each day. He had not understood that being careful about being happy was its own kind of loss. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just the slow cumulative cost of a life lived slightly below what it could have been. Wednesday night had changed that, not because it was a dramatic event. Not because he had been a hero, which was not a word he used about himself and would not accept from others. But because in the moment when it mattered, he had acted without calculating the cost. He had simply seen what needed to be done and done it. And that quality, the willingness to act without calculating what it might cost you, was the same quality that applied to everything else. To happiness. To risk. To the things in your life that might not work out but are worth trying for anyway. He had been a maintenance worker in a faded uniform carrying a toolbox on a Wednesday night. He had seen something nobody else saw. He had acted, and everything had changed. Not because he was special. Not because of the title he now held, or the salary he now earned, or the position he now occupied in a company that mattered. But because he was exactly who he was, a man with a hole in him, with a daughter who asked impossible questions, with a history that had broken something, and in the breaking made it stronger, and being exactly who he was, had turned out to be precisely enough. He thought about Claire. He did it softly without the old pressure. He thought about her eyes which Lily had and her laugh which sometimes came out of Lily at unexpected moments, and still caught him off guard in the best possible way. He thought about what she would have said about all of this. He thought she would have said something direct and a little funny and exactly right, because that was who she was, and he would have laughed, and then they would have talked it through, and he would have felt as he always had with her, that he was in the right place. How was in the right place? That was not nothing. That was in fact everything. He looked at the crayon drawing on the refrigerator, the stick figure labeled Dada, still taped there though. It was slightly more worn at the corners now, slightly more incorporated into the apartment's permanent landscape. He thought about Lily, saying we could probably do more than a corner. He thought about the look on Victoria's face when she said she was glad he was there, and the way that sentence contained more than it said, the way sentences sometimes do, when the person saying them is being honest all the way down. He thought about Pete in the diner, saying she looks at you like you're the most interesting thing in the room. He thought about the door latch in the stairwell that was 3 millimeters short of fully closing, and how 3 millimeters was sometimes the whole difference between something that held and something that didn't. And he thought them the whole story of his life, from Claire to Lily, to the hotel corridor, to the stairwell, to the diner, to this chair in this apartment. At this hour, the whole story was a story about 3 millimeters. About the small distance between the life you're living and the life you're capable of. About the moment you stop measuring the gap and step across it. He had stepped across it, and on the other side was not a new person. Not a reinvented version of himself, polished and repaired and presenting a cleaner face to the world. It was the same Daniel Carter, worn, honest, imperfect, carrying everything he had always carried, just not afraid of it anymore. He turned off the light. He went to bed. He slept. And in the morning, Lily woke him at 6:53 on the dot, because Lily Carter had never once in her life slept past 7, and she stood in the doorway and looked at him with the green and brown eyes and said, "Dada, are you happy today?" He looked at his daughter. I thought about the whole weight of the question, the whole history of every morning before this one when the answer had been more complicated than it should have been. He thought about how long it had taken to get here. He thought about what it had cost. Then he said simply, completely, without hesitation and without calculation, "Yeah, Bug, I am." Lily nodded satisfied, like the answer confirmed something she had already decided. "Good," she said. "Me too." And she went to make cereal. And Daniel Carter, a man who had once been invisible in a faded uniform, a man who had lost everything that mattered, and built something true, from what remained a man who had learned that the most important thing any person could do was to see clearly and act anyway. That man got up and made coffee and went to meet his life. Not the life he had lost, the one he had earned.